Hello everybody, I am Jeffrey Hauser, author of the Learn With series. A colleague of mine recently asked how he could do two-way binding in Angular for a dynamically generated component in TypeScript. And Angular does not provide an easy way, but with some work you can get it working. I did some rabbit holing and experimentation around this concept because of the question, and I'm turning it into this podcast series, this screencast series about two-way binding. In this final episode, I'm going to do a full review of everything and create the sample up from scratch using the observables to talk from the child component to the parent and using a proxy to talk to the parent to the child, and also how to create the component from scratch with TypeScript. Okay, we're back for one final episode. This is going to be a review of, first we're going to create a component from scratch. I'm not going to go over that component, that's way back in episode 2, but any component that's set up to support two-way binding, which means it's going to have some value property and a value changed event emitter. We're going to create that component from scratch inside TypeScript. We're going to go ahead and use that event emitter to set up binding from the child to the parent, and then we're going to use a proxy to set up a binding from the parent to the child. First thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to change this value into an object because proxies won't work on simple values. So let's put in our component factory resolver. And the component factory resolver is something that we're going to use to basically create a component on the fly. We're going to pass it in the component. It will then we're going to pass it in the component. It'll know how to turn that component into a component factory, which we will then use to create it in TypeScript. And we're going to add this view container ref, which is another Angular service that we're dropping in. And this view container ref is going to be basically a reference to our app components HTML. I'm going to, so this object, this is the value1.value is the object we want to change and pass down, or change downstream and pass up. So let's create our new component factory. Basically our new component. There we go. So we drill down into the resolve component factory method and pass in our component. Keep in mind, this is the actual component. We're not passing in an instance of the component. We're actually passing in the component, basically the component definition. Then we're going to create component. Going to pass in the component factory. And we're going to set the default value on this instance. And oh, I forgot to store the component ref equals. There we go. Component ref dot instance dot value equals value1 dot value. So that is setting that up. This. So we've created a component, an instance of our comp1 component. We've set the default value on it. Now let's go ahead and we're going to use the event emitter. So and by listening to this event emitter, we can reset our our value1 instance variable to the value that is internal to the component whenever it changes. So that's how we use this value change event emitter to perform the binding from the child to the parent. And we're going to use a proxy to go in the reverse direction from the parent to the child. And first we're going to create a handler object and object prop value, which will set it. So every property on our proxied component will pass through this. And we'll turn true. But if the prop is value and the component ref dot instance dot value is not equal to object prop, meaning it has changed, then we're going to do, we're passing down equals pass down the new value. And we're going to do this dot value1 equals new proxy this dot value1 handler. So handler is basically the proxy wrapper object. So create a new component from scratch with the component factory, bind from the child component to the parent component by subscribing to the property change observable, bind from the parent component to the child using a proxy handler that sets the value in the underlying component, underlying object instance, but also does a check to see if we're changing a property, and if so, pass that down. So everything did compile, so let's see if this full example worked. So parent child worked fine. Ooh, so I am running into errors, so let's see what I did. Aha. So major mistake there. Recompiled. Anyway, if you didn't catch what the mistake was, I was changing the object that we're proxying, not changing the value property on it. So goes from parent to child and goes from child to parent. This works great. And that is how we create a component on the fly, and one approach to implementing two-way binding on that component, something that is not obvious to do within the context of TypeScript or Angular, because the two-way binding is really part of the Angular HTML template compiler, and when we're creating a component inside of TypeScript, we're not running it through or any special syntax through the Angular HTML template compiler. I really hope you all enjoyed this series as much as I enjoyed putting it together. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, please check out my book series at learnwith.com, which gives you a lot of information about how I use Angular every day to build enterprise applications for clients.